After almost 5 years, there have been 22 different FNCSs, and since the beginning, viewers have predicted Clix to be at the very top of the leaderboard pretty much every season. However, even when he is looking his best and everyone is thinking this time will finally be different, he's never actually been that close to winning. Now in the past, the closest he's gotten was 4th twice, but when you look at the point difference between him and 1st, like I said, he wasn't actually that close. That now brings us to this season where everything's spiced up. This is the last FNCS for players to qualify for the Global Championship at the end of the year. And with EU and NA having the same amount of qualification spots, we've seen a ton of the top players from EU come over to NA in order to compete. And as you all know, one of those pros is one of the best players to have ever touched this game, Veno. And of course, he had to be Clix's new teammate. Throughout the first part of this chapter, Clix had been playing with Epic Whale, and it was with him where he would end up getting that most recent 4th. But after a bad last season, he decided to split ways after Veno hit him up to play together. That being said, Veno is by far the best player Clix has and probably will ever play with. I touched on why this is in this previous video, but to summarize it, Veno has spent this entire season forming Clix into the perfect player and teammate, even going as far to make sure the small things are done to perfection. For example, how he moves around when rotating, or even peeking a certain way to help get Storm Surge. And well, you can tell it's definitely been working because Clix is 100% in his prime right now. This all happened very early in the season, and as you all probably know, this meta has changed a lot from Nitro Fist being vaulted, Nitro Splashes being nerfed, and even crash pads being added literally 2 weeks before the grand finals started. And that's not even close to it when you realize Epic Games made a meta-changing nerf to an item just 1 day before finals, which caused a ton of teams to do awful and others to pop off. Now, like I said, the meta has been all over the place, and at first, Clix and Veno struggled. However, they did start nailing down their all-spawn strategies early on. Their drop spot this time was Sandy Steps, and with tons of heals, vending machines, a forecast tower, and launch pads nearby, they had literally everything they could have asked for. But even though they didn't really get dropped on, there was one team in particular who was determined to ruin their run, which again we'll touch on later. The moment we saw a significant change in their performance was during the first FNCS qualifier week. This was right after Nitro Fist were removed, meaning 1, it was way less likely to get randomly jumped on and killed by it, and 2, they could actually play height and not have to worry about the other 30 people flying through the sky. Because of this change, they would start playing very smart and aggressive to take height, which in the end led to them winning 3 out of the 6 games and of course placing 1st overall. This was their best performance as a team yet, and it had everyone asking, will this be the season we actually see Clix win? And everyone would get even more excited to see them get 5th in the next Duo Cash Cup and in the last qualifier week finals. And when they couldn't look any better, they would come through with another dominant performance, winning a Duo Cash Cup. At this point, they went from a team who had potential to qualify for the Global Championship and possibly top 5 to a team everyone could see winning, all because of one simple change in the meta. But there was no way they could have predicted how much the meta was going to change within these next few weeks. The first was the addition of crash pads. This seemingly came out of nowhere and was possibly added because the Nitro Fists were removed. This item makes rotates a lot easier to do in sketchy situations, but this affected height a lot. With this item, teams can simply throw a crash pad down and hit it. Then more often than not, they'll be above or the same layer as height, which obviously makes it a lot harder to actually hold it. However, this isn't the end of the world. Clix and Veno still play really well when not on height, it's just a lot easier to have a better game when up there. This brings us to about 1 week before the grand finals began, and every team was scrambling to perfect their strategies going into it, because remember, top 10 teams qualify to globals, and for most of them, that's the end goal. But of course, Epic Games had something crazy in store. This entire season, and mainly seen during the FNCS semifinals, it was starting to become very clear that this season had a massive problem, which were the slurp cacti. These plants were found throughout the entirety of the new biome on the south part of the map, and whenever you hit one, you'd get healed for 25 HP. But the thing that made it really broken was that it infinitely regenerated. This became a massive problem because teams would just find a cactus, base up on it, then trade Storm Surge damage with another duo who was doing the exact same thing. This meant every team dropping north had an extremely hard time to stay above the surge threshold. And looking at this here, you can see the surge this season was way harder than not only last season, but ever. Because of this, Clix and Veno realized they needed to switch things up. Before, they played for the forecast tower, however they realized doing this meant they couldn't claim a cactus in order to maximize their surge. And if you couldn't tell by now, getting Storm Surge damage is the #1 thing you need to do out of literally anything to do well in an FNCS finals. Luckily for them, they had one more do a cash cup to test this new strategy out. However, they ended up playing the worst we've seen them play since the start of FNCS. But most importantly, you guys should probably drop a like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Things were now looking a bit concerning, until just one day before Grands, Epic would make a bombshell of an announcement. They would tweet out saying only for the days FNCS occurred, Slurp Cacti would no longer regenerate. This was probably the craziest last second change we've ever seen in the entire history of competitive Fortnite. Literally the entire meta this season revolved around those Slurp plants for 99% of duos. In making this change last second, ruined pretty much every single person's strategy, and obviously the pros were furious. However, Clix and Veno were pretty much the only duo this change helped. The previous game plan, which was sitting up on the forecast tower hill, getting Surge from there, then buying extra heals from the vending machine so they can trade damage, was back in motion. But later they'd find out the hard way, some people were not happy about this. With the most wild last second change we've seen, just 24 hours later, the grand finals were here. And with Clix's strats now not being affected and throwing in the fact that they were uncontested, everyone was ready to see if they could finally take home his first FNCS title.
Let's go! Veno, you're the best to touch the game, bro.
After day one, Clix and Veno were able to play extremely consistently, and this resulted in them being first place on the leaderboard, but not by too much with the reigning FNCS champs right on their heels. Everyone was hyped to see that he was doing it. Day 2 was potentially going to be when Clix would finally be crowned an FNCS winner, but nobody was prepared for what was actually going to happen. In fact, we saw the first inklings of it in the last game of day 1. In this match, Zypha and Shore would end up rotating into their drop, taking some of their loot from the vending machine, then breaking it so Clix and Veno couldn't get anything from it. And like I mentioned earlier, this vending machine is one of the most important parts of their game plan. But when viewers thought about it more, things started to seem a bit sketchy. For one, Zypha was pretty much dead last on the leaderboard, and in 5th place, still in contention to win, was Booga. Zypha and Booga are really good friends, and from what I've heard, I believe they're actually roommates. On top of this, apparently this isn't the first time Booga sent him to grief another team at the top of the leaderboard, but I do want to say there is no hard proof. However, this still obviously upset Clix and his fans, but what made it even worse was when he switched his drop to fully land on them during day 2. Now thankfully they ended up switching their drops, and this was actually the only game where Clix would run into Zypha. However, there was a completely new duo that would take over his role. We'll be avoiding all the tweets and drama and stuff because I don't want to get into all of it, and instead we're just going to focus on what actually happened in the games. But the players in question are Flappy and Evan. On day 1, they were landing the split in between Clix's drop and Pleasant Piazza, saying that they did actually try to do a sneak play on Veno during the first game of Grands, however it clearly didn't work very well for them. After day 1, just like Zypha, they were in pretty much dead last, so in an attempt to get more loot, they decided to drop on the forecast tower hill to take all of that stuff there. Now this wouldn't be the end of the world, but they must have seen what Zypha and Shore did previously, because almost every single game on day 2, they would destroy the vending machine without taking any of its loot. Now this entire day was really weird, because some games they would do what I just said, then others they'd straight up drop on them or end up dying before even getting a chance to loot more than one chest. That being said, what they did was enough to throw Clix and Veno off their game a few times, since understandably they had no idea what was going to happen. However, Clix and Veno still prevailed. They were still in first place up until the 10th game, where they dropped down to 2nd, but with the points being 1.5 times more than day 1, they could still easily come through with the win in the remaining 2 matches. However, that also goes for pretty much the rest of the top 5, meaning this could potentially come down to the wire. It really just depends on what happens in game 11 to see who will pull ahead and who will fall behind before the final match. Dropping in, they noticed there were 2 teams contesting each other at the top of their hill. Luckily, they got good guns and Veno was able to glide over and steal one of the kills. This was probably the best case scenario, already getting a bit of surge plus points for that elim. After this, things got even better. They were able to get the forecast tower and their vending machine wasn't broken. Everything was teeing up to be the perfect game that they desperately needed. And because of all this, they were able to stick to their game plan. They were able to tank zone, then pad onto a good position, and thanks to Veno's insane aim, he was able to take down Miro. Because of this kill, they were able to build a massive base with the leftover materials and pretty much cap everything they needed. It was looking like they could easily do well, and after all, they had literally everything they could have needed. Most importantly though, they were above surge like crazy. But all good things must come to an end. The next zone will pull max distance, and while doing this rotate, they had to use half of their materials and a good chunk of their heals, which is not ideal. But in Fortnite, one refresh can change everything. That's when Veno spotted a player close by and fried him, getting the knock. Unfortunately, another team was able to get the majority of the loot. Because of this, they barely had any materials, and since they were on the edge of zone, they had to just crash pad and hope. However, this put them into a really bad spot where they would get lobby focused. Somehow, after using all of their builds and all of their heals, they were able to live, but they had literally nothing left. And after desperately trying to get one last refresh, they'd go down in 20th place. At this point, all they could do was hope everyone else had a mediocre or bad game. However, looking at the leaderboard directly after, pretty much every team that was right next to them before had a good game, meaning they got bumped down into 4th place, almost 120 points behind 1st. After this, all hope was lost. There was pretty much no chance they could win, and all Clix could do was try to get into the top 3, which would be his best ever FNCS placement. But despite getting top 3 in the final game, they still finished in 4th place overall. This was a heartbreaking end to his best season ever, and Veno seems to be taking it the hardest. That leaves the question, what's next for this duo? Well, even though they didn't win, they still managed to qualify for the Global Championship coming up in September. Now, from how much we've seen them improve this season, everyone is hoping at LAN will be where he actually wins, which would be very poetic. However, they're going to have to face some of the best players in the entire world, and it will be extremely hard to beat not only the top teams in North America, but also EU. It's impossible to say how they will actually do since we have no idea what Season 4 entails, but no matter what, it will undoubtedly be harder to win globals versus an FNCS on NA when you look at how many top players are actually there. And sadly, after this, it looks like Clix and Veno will never duo again. Veno has already stated how much he disliked playing on NA, so it seems very unlikely he'll want to come back, and that's not even talking about visa issues and all of that. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, he is the best teammate Clix will ever get the chance to play with. This doesn't mean it's impossible for him to win with someone else, just way less likely when you think about it. And overall, as much as we want to see him win, I think everyone can agree this was Clix's best chance to ever do it, and as time goes on, I only see the odds going down. But it's Fortnite at the end of the day, and you can never say never. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and check out these videos here. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your days. Peace out.